Okay. Here. Sure. Pivot over here, make sure that I'm in the screen. All right, very good. All right, well, thanks again for joining us this morning. I appreciate your time. And then, can you spell your first and last name for us?
Sure, it's Lindsey Blom, Lindsey Blom.
Great. And what's your title at the university?
I'm currently the Associate Athletic Director for Championship Performance and a Professor of Sport and Exercise Psychology.
We'll talk a little bit more about those titles
Yep.
a little bit later in the interview. But for now, I saw that you earned degrees from West Virginia University. So where would you call home?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I actually grew up in Indianapolis. And when I was deciding where to play soccer, I was tired of playing soccer in the cold, and had a chance to play soccer down in Georgia. And they have this really nice Bermuda grass. This was a time when turf fields were only the really bad AstroTurf. So you played on it and you had burns on your skin for weeks. So turf up here was not something common. So I played down there in this, I call it golf course grass. And I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to play soccer on that type of grass in a warm place. And so then I knew I was going to go to the South to play soccer, and had a chance to play at Georgia Southern, and spent 6 years there. And I would say that really was very different than the Midwest. But I did fall in love with the people and the temperature and the close to the beach, sort of the weather down there. It was nice. It was really nice.
How was it different from your Midwest roots beyond just, some of the brief examples you just gave?
Yeah. So I think that part of the way that it's interesting when you're in a college town, it may or may not be representative of the culture within the larger community. So I think that there's something there. But most of the people that came to Georgia Southern, they weren't athletes, were from Georgia. And we were in South Georgia, at that. And so in a lot of rural communities, so the rural components were actually very similar to what we would see kind of around Ball State in the rural areas in Indiana. But there was definitely this idea. It was very, there was a lot of country music, which was not something that I spent a lot of time with at my high school. My high school is in the north side of Indianapolis, so more of an urban high school. And so a lot of country music, a lot of pickup trucks, which is not something that we had up here. A lot of really good food, a lot of good food. And I think the hospitality vibe grew in me there. It was very hospitable. My teammates would take me home on the weekends, and they would have these large family dinners. Lots of church and spirituality were a really big part of that, very overtly. I feel like in the Midwest, it is a part of many people's identity, but it's not as overt as it is in the Deep South. And so there was a lot of outward religious that was part of that.
What high school on the north side of Indy?
North Central.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I coached there.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm familiar with North Central
absolutely.
and their tennis courts. Yes, yes.
Very good tennis courts.
Okay, fair enough. And you said you're a soccer player. In fact, all conference I saw at Georgia Southern. So congratulations. Very belated on that point, but yes, congratulations. As you look back though on all your years playing soccer or just as an athlete, what's your most memorable moment?
Oh, yeah. I think there's two moments was one moment and one theme that fits out. My first moment was I got dropped off from my parents. They drove me down, 12 hours, dropped me off on what would be Worthern's front step for preseason with 2 bags, and we're like, good luck, daughter. Because it was preseason, you couldn't move into dorms. We were staying with teammates, and and I would just sit around I didn't know a soul. I didn't know Georgia. I did know the state capital, but there wasn't much else that I knew about Georgia at that time. And I was just like, okay, this is the real deal. I am 12 hours from home, playing on my Bermuda grass in my warm weather, but what else, And just the instant connection around teammates and people felt really, really great. And then my very first, so I'm a hard worker and not super skilled. So I knew that if I wanted to play a lot, I had to be fit and just be a workhorse. So I got to play in our very first game, which happened to be against a team that I was also my list of, I took a recruiting trip there. So I was determined to make them realize that, that I was doing good things. And I would play defensive center mid and finish the game. And my coach is like, nice game. Super nervous, obviously. And he's like, I think you touched every piece of grass on the entire field. He's like, that's not what I would call effective soccer playing. He's like, but I'm glad that you're working hard and I'm glad that you're fit enough that you could play 90 minutes and touch every piece of grass. But I realized then that I needed to use my energy in more effective ways. But I also realized that I was really excited to be there and just loved it. And then the more bigger picture is almost every year we get together with 5 of my teammates from college who played soccer. 4 of the 6 of us married men on the men's soccer team from Georgia Southern as well, and our families. So there's 25 of us in a house in Florida that we get together for a week almost every year. And we've been doing that for 12 years now. And it's really cool to see how close we are, still be with our significant others, and then have all of our kids be friends. And they're from all over the United States now. And so it's really fun that memory has lasted now 25 plus years.
Okay. I mean, when your parents dropped you off, you said, good luck, daughter.
Yeah.
So what was going through your head when that happened?
Yeah. I think that they were super supportive of my soccer playing, but never pushed me to do anything that wasn't my choice. They would challenge me if I said I had a goal and I wasn't necessarily having the behaviors to match the goal. But they never put their goals onto me that I can remember, at least that stuck with me. And so I think that I'm the oldest, so that was their first kid to like drop off somewhere. And so I think that I don't know what they were thinking when they left. I'm sure it was a long 12-hour ride home for them. But I appreciated their trust that this is your decision, this is your life. And even though it may or may not make sense to us, if it makes sense to you, we'll support you. So I felt prepared, ready to go. Like I ran multiple times all summer long, every day. And so I felt prepared, I felt excited, and I felt like I didn't really have much to lose at that point. Nobody knew me. It was a kind of a fresh start, which was fun from a soccer standpoint, from a friend standpoint. And I was in 45 minutes from the beach, which was much closer than you are in Indianapolis. So, yeah.
That's right. I mean, unless you're talking one of the reservoirs.
That's right. That's right.
The oldest child thing. Yes, I remember that. Well, my dad was fine. It was like 1 down, 3 to go. Mom wasn't though. Mom wasn't fun. So I understand that, having to break them in for that.
Yeah.
So what about, let's switch it over then. What about a devastating moment from your time as an athlete? Not maybe at Georgia Southern, but maybe not.
Yeah, good question. I had a chance while I was at Georgia Southern. I got to play and start every single game that was possible in my college career. Many athletes don't get to say that for a variety of reasons, but injury is usually a big reason for that. So I didn't appreciate at the time how much good fortune I had to not have any injury ever that took me out of a game. So I didn't have those kind of moments there, but I continued to play soccer and had a chance to play in just rec kind of soccer co-ed in West Virginia when I was a doc student, and tore my ACL there in a game that was, I don't have a great sport memory, but I can picture this tackle, this big guy. And he came in really hard, and I came in determined to not let him get the ball. And I probably should just let him get the ball because he totally took me down and tore my ACL. So I made it all through college, and I played a little semi-pro after that, and it was totally fine. But now I'm in this rec place as a doc student without very good insurance, without the natural support around you that you have as an athlete, and I had to deal with it. And I was getting ready to graduate, getting ready to move. So it was not the best time to have an injury. Not that there was a really good time, but that was probably a moment where I was like, oh yeah, I can't break.
Tackle here?
Oh yeah, the ball's coming in.
Okay.
This, I'm probably exaggerating on how big he was, but fairly tall as you, much thicker than you, and came in. And many other people we would play soccer against as adults don't always come from a soccer background. So the way they play soccer isn't necessarily the way people who play soccer come. So sometimes some of the fundamentals aren't the same. And so he came in hard, tackling the ball, and then just took me down with the ball.
I got it. Okay, so he was
Yeah.
going after it and
He
then
was
you
going,
were in
yes,
it. Okay,
yeah,
all
he
right.
wasn't doing.
So it wasn't like a football, like
Correct.
full
I
on.
mean, he probably came in with more intensity than was necessary, but it was fun. So.
Got it. Well, besides soccer, what additional sports did you play and to what level?
I played softball in high school until my sophomore year, when halfway through the season, the coach said you had to pick soccer or softball. My high school coach did, and I think she thought I was gonna pick softball, and I did not. So I left the team halfway through. She said, like, I need a decision tomorrow. So I was like, okay, I'm out. So I don't think that's what she was expecting. I wasn't a great softball player, but I was fast and could steal bases. And so I did that a lot for them. So I did that. And then I played, basketball. We won our 8th grade championship, of course, basketball. But again, you can imagine that wasn't super great at basketball for a variety of reasons. I could steal the ball, but once I stole the ball, then I had to find someone to make the layup because I wasn't very good at making the layups. And then I would dabble in anything. Like we play like football. We would play, as graduate students, we had something called SPAF, Sports Psychology and Friends T-shirts, and we would play anything and everything we possibly could to balance the academic world. And then when I was 40, when I turned 40, I decided that I was going to pick up tennis. So and tennis is really designed to let people come in at whatever level they are at any point and take their money and find them good opportunities to play. So I was really fascinated how well it was built for letting someone new as an adult come in. And so then I played tennis 3 or 4 times a week and really got into it, played some leagues. So it was a lot of fun. So
Singles or double?
I prefer singles because I'd rather run all over the place. Nobody really wants to be my doubles partner, but my husband is my doubles partner. We play on Sundays. So yeah, that's good.
Very good. Well, you also coached, I believe 20 years as a youth and high school soccer coach. So I'm curious, still as a player, what's an interaction or an exchange that you had with one of your coaches that maybe at that time you thought was unnecessary or too much, but in the end, it proved useful?
Yeah. I have very vivid memory of that one. I was playing, probably a sophomore. I was a late bloomer for soccer, partly because it was growing in our areas, partly because I was the first child. So sometimes they get access to things later in life. But I was sophomore trying to decide how soccer was going to fit into my world. Played for my club coach, who was a Division III women's soccer coach at the time. And he said to me, "You will never play college soccer." And I don't remember the context of why at that moment he felt like that was important for me to say. I don't know if we were talking about it or he was mad at me or whatever. And he's just like, "You're just not very good." And so coming from a Division III at that point, I was like, oh my gosh, if I can't play at the Division III level, I certainly can't play at Division II, Division I. But I use that as fuel to say, like, just kidding, I will. And so a few years later, yeah, I'm sure he doesn't remember that, but it fueled me. At that moment, I was furious, obviously, and devastated and confused, but yeah, it did give me some fuel for later.
Well, then progressing into your years as then a coach, in your estimation, how have players changed since the start of your coaching career to now, if you're still coaching, or at least the end of that time span?
Yeah, we do. We coach our 11-year-old son right now. Yeah, I think I do have coaches say that. A lot of college coaches will have that kind of conversation. People are always changing. I don't know that we're always growing as people coaching them. So I don't think about it that way. Like, I just don't think of like, oh, it's so different. Like their parent interaction is different. The social media is different. The recruiting is different. Like, I understand that some of those things are different, but deep down they're humans who want to thrive in a space that is, they're not sure what their competency level is. They're not sure what their max level is. And they've got different dynamics around them from a support system. So I think the way that I try to get to know players, what they need, what they want, what their goals are, is actually still similar to what I did before. Now, again, 99% of my experience is from 6th grade to 12th grade. So I don't know if that looks different at the college level. But at that level, I feel like my interactions from a day-to-day standpoint are similar what they would, with how I interact with the athletes.
And just to clarify, is it actually to like 2004 to 2024?
Well, we still coach. We're coaching indoor and outdoor soccer right now.
Okay.
So, I think I started coaching in 1996 as a college student, as a college athlete. I was coaching at our club
Okay,
down in Georgia.
so it's actually, yeah, more than 20 years.
Yeah.
So, wow, great.
Good.
Well, you did mention in that answer, parent interaction,
Yeah.
social media. Okay, that's changed. So I'm curious, also as a coach, what you say to the difference in parental interaction.
Yeah, so I coached in South Georgia, youth soccer. I coached in West Virginia, and then I coached in South Mississippi, and all of those areas were fairly underdeveloped soccer areas compared to what they are now, but certainly compared to more of a city space. So there was a lot of exposure to parents at that time that looked and that they didn't have a lot of exposure beyond their one child's experience. But I remember being in Mississippi in particular, a team that had won several state championships. So my husband and I are coming in to coach them, and some of our players were really upset with the way their parents had been acting. So I asked the athletes to write a letter to the parents about how they want their parents to behave in the sidelines, what that looked like. So each one wrote a letter, and I said, right now, just write it. We don't have to, we can decide together if we're gonna give it to them or not, but just write it, like all the things you'd want to say. And as they started writing, several of them got fairly emotional, and then some of them and then some of them decided to give it to them. I didn't give it to them, but I said, if you want to give it to your parent and have a conversation, go for it. And I remember at that point, one, there were actually triplets were on our team, and they wrote a letter together to their mom and dad, and their mom came to me later crying and said, like, I just hadn't ever thought about their perspective of what they would want. And so it was a really powerful moment for them as a family to have a conversation about what that looked like. But that was in 2007 that we were having that challenge with what parents should look like on the sidelines. I also had another parent. I remember walking through my house with a parent screaming at me for all the things that I was not doing right. And I thought, why am I coaching for, I don't know, $100 a month and having, getting screamed at by a parent who has never played soccer, doesn't know anything, and she's not like listening or talking to me, like screaming, lots of cuss words. And I'm not usually a confrontational person. So and those were early 2000s. So, and I think that those interactions are there now. So there are some parents who are overly engaged. There are some parents who are under engaged. There are some parents who want to be the best they can and take feedback on how to be better. So I've seen that be similar over the years. I think the way they get to coaches is different now, because like before I could have ignored a phone. Now it's a text, or now it's an email or whatever. So I think the communication channels have increased. The public display of disagreement with coaches is increased. Like this mom surely that was yelling at me surely would have blasted all over social media that I was an awful coach if that had been a choice for her at that time. She was that kind of person. And so that would have impacted me differently than for us to have it more of a private conversation around it. So I think the public display of disagreement is really intense for coaches now. And that wasn't something, but I'm not sure the parents themselves are different, just the way that they communicate their messages maybe.
I know you said that the letter example, that was 2007, so 17 years ago. Do you happen to remember any contents of the letters, like in general? I mean, maybe not one, maybe one specific, but if not, just in general, like, what do the kids say? What do they write? Yeah,
they were very, very intellectual girls. And so they had a lot of smart words to say, but I tried to frame it to the players as we were talking through it. I was like, this isn't an opportunity for you to tell your parents that they suck. This is an opportunity for you to say how their behaviors impact you, and then suggest behaviors that would be impactful in a more positive way. So really trying to set everybody up for a positive discussion, not for just like, let's gripe sort of thing. And so I do remember them, and again, they were working together as a team, which might have helped them, the three girls, but I think they were really specific in the way that their mom in particular's behaviors made them feel when they played, that they were nervous, that they were confused because usually her suggestions didn't match my suggestions as a coach, or their instructions. So it was confusing. And as players who were trying to learn the game, they wanted to please her, but they wanted to play the best that they could. And that was confusing for them. And that they really just wanted her to be quiet, and they wanted her to just support the match of the game. And I do remember, and I can't remember, if it was that letter or one of the other ones that said like, can we please not talk about the game on the way home until I'm ready? And I thought that was a powerful request of like, can we just do it on my terms versus your terms? But I try to remember that as a parent, because I'm a parent of two youth athletes now, and boy, I have a lot to say after those matches and games. But I'll say to my 11-year-old, your dad and I, because now we're coaching, so he gets, the benefit of two coaches in the car and two parents in the car who know the game when we're leaving soccer. And so I try to say, my husband and I may have different approaches for this, which is totally fine, but my approach is like, tell me when you're ready, I have things to share. And sometimes he'll ask me later and sometimes he won't. So then I really just have to really work hard to look forward and not talk to him.
That's such parents, yes, they have a lot to say. I remember
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
A lot of looks out the window
Uh-huh,
in the
uh-huh.
car on the way home. Yes, yes. Okay, well, how would you describe your coaching philosophy? Now that can go on and on and on.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna do it this way.
Yeah.
How might you describe it if you had to tweet it?
Yeah, good question. I'm not a tweeter, so this doesn't come like naturally to others in the room, but I think, can I put a twist on it? I think if you ask the players who played for me how to tweet it,
Sure.
then maybe that they could say something like player centric, relationship oriented, very supportive. I don't know if that's right in order of characters. But
Yeah, no, you got room.
Okay.
So, okay, we'll expand on
Okay.
that since, because it's
Yeah.
280
Okay,
characters, so
okay,
we got
okay.
room here.
Okay.
So, how so?
Yeah.
You know,
I think I really enjoy coaching young people. And I feel like my responsibility is to help them find their way to thrive in the way that they want. And so that may be on the soccer field with me, that may be deciding that soccer's not their thing anymore. But I want them to find their way. So while I will push to make them better and but that's, to me, that's also helping them be better. So really trying to figure out what their goals are and then saying, if these are your goals, let's make sure your behaviors match your goals. And putting the skills around them and then ultimately trying to make them, helping them realize that they are in charge of achieving those goals, not me helping them, achieving them for them.
so then at what point did you decide that you wanted to become an academic? And
Yeah.
now we're back to some of your titles, professor in, sports psychology, sociology.
I was a psych major, and so I knew I wanted to do something. I don't know if I was exactly thinking academia at the time, but you can't do much with a psych undergrad. So I knew there had to be grad school involved. And so I was thinking about either forensic psychology, IO psychology, and then I took a sports psych class. I was like, I'm in. And then after taking that class, I realized that as a sports psychology professor, I would have a chance to do the research, which I enjoyed, teaching, which to me was an extension of coaching, and then to do the practice, which I wanted. So I knew that job in particular would allow me to do a little bit of all of it. So that's kind of what I decided. So it's probably sophomore year of college, I decided I want to be a professor.
What does a professor in exercise sports psychology do?
That's a great question. I don't think we do much. We just sit around, we teach one or two classes, that's the myth that people have sometimes around what we do. So yeah, I think, one of the, certainly we have a graduate program here, so teach graduate classes in that sense. There are not very many places that have undergraduate programs, so usually there's only one or two undergraduate classes that might fall within somebody in sport and exercise psychology as a professor's area. But we do a lot of different things. Sometimes they're in sports sociology, sometimes they're in sport management programs, sometimes they're in PE programs, like they can really fit in a variety of areas from a teaching standpoint. But I get to do research and I really enjoy creating new knowledge. And then the second part of that is I enjoy creating new knowledge so then we can have application for that knowledge. So really an applied researcher. I like helping our students answer questions around the research component and grow in their skill set. It's usually something that they don't feel very confident in. So in the master's program, I can help them grow in that skill set, which is cool. And then I think there's the service component that we all have to do in academia, but I've worked hard to make my service components fit with the things that are important to me. So whether that's community-based work or work with organizations that support areas of research that I do, or things that support graduate education. So I've been able to dabble in that space. And then I do probably about a few hours a week of kind of consulting working with specifically youth athletes, their mental game, working with coaches and helping them become better coaches too.
So your coaching philosophy, that tweet a
Yeah,
little while
yeah.
ago, to what extent might that overlap with your mentorship of your undergrads doing research?
Yeah, so I love coaching, and when I was a club coach, we coached, we played every weekend. We were gone two or three times a week. We'd be practicing. But when I became a mom, I realized that I wanted to adjust that schedule. So I became an assistant coach, so there's a little more flexibility. And I decided that part of the way that I would increase my coaching, if it wasn't going to be on a traveling club team, was to teach. And so I think that allowed me to think, like, I've got young people that I'm helping to thrive in a space that they want to thrive in. And luckily we got to talk about sports stuff. So while it wasn't soccer only, it was very parallel and transferable into that space, which then fulfilled my bucket, wanting to coach in some way.
Well, what did you have to do to become a professor? You said sophomore year, you kind of made the decision to go in that direction. So what did you have to do to earn this title?
Yeah, a lot of school, a lot of debt, a lot of classes, those sorts of things. So I got a master's degree in sports psych, stayed at Georgia Southern. Had an opportunity to be there for a little longer, which was great. And started picking up on my research skills. And then there aren't a ton there's only probably about, 75 graduate programs in sports psychology in the whole world. So there's not one at every university everywhere. And so then to pick ones that had PhD programs or doc programs that were of interest to me, there were probably 5 that really were of interest. And so I looked at one, Missouri, Columbia, and then West Virginia. Those were my 2. And Missouri, Columbia was only taking 1 person that year. And one of my best friends from my graduate program got into that one. So a little bittersweet, like supporting him, but like, okay, you go do that. And then I got into West Virginia with one of my friends from Georgia Southern too, which was wonderful. And that was a great opportunity there. So I could get 4 years of education, the dissertation. I also got a master's in counseling, so it could complement my ability to work on one-on-one with individuals in this space. Yeah, so 4.5 years. So 2 years, 4 years, lots of debt, and then trying to find a job.
What's a dissertation?
Yeah, good question. Dissertation. What is a dissertation? Oh, philosophically or yeah, okay. Yeah, so this opportunity, I think in the academic field, we want people to be good researchers. So this process of understanding research from start to finish and leading a project, which develops a skill set then to be hopefully productive as a faculty member on your own. So you have to develop a research project. I looked at how if coaches had feedback around the needs that of their athletes on their team wanted from their coach. So like if I was coaching you, I would ask you, what do you want from your coach? I would get that feedback, and then at the beginning of the season, and then try to use that to help me. So we helped coaches ask those questions, and then we designed different types of interventions to help them take that feedback and then put it into practice. So a very applied component around my coaching, I use male soccer coaches that are high school. But yeah, project from start to finish, probably about 130 pages of writing over 2 years of time, with a project that was, B- actual research. But, had a chance to get some funding, had a chance to work, but it grew my skill set, and like, I can do research on my own with supporting team around me. But I think that was part of that process. It's like, can you lead a project on your own?
And you mentioned, in addition to your responsibilities as a professor, there's this newly created role that you've earned meant to address athletes' physical and mental needs.
Yeah.
So what are current needs that you've commonly noticed among collegiate student athletes?
Yeah. We've heard over the last 4 or 5 years in particular, student athletes voice their desire for more support at the college level. Where before, I feel like we as administrators and coaches were just doing what we thought was best. And then their voice became louder and louder about like, this is actually what we want as well. And in particular around injury care, and concussions, but also around mental health. So we've heard, especially our MAC student athletes a couple years ago, they wrote, they call it op-ed kind of page and read it at our leadership. So all the ADs, all the senior women's administrators, and all the faculty athletic reps from all the MAC schools were in this room, very official and formal. And the leader of the student athlete organization for the MAC read this page that said, we are requesting that you all increase your mental health services that are for student athletes. And so I will remember that they wrote a very nice letter and read it, and we're really saying, we need your commitment to this. And so I think I have been interested in coming into this space because I hear their voices and I want to figure out how we can listen and then enact some of their requests. So, yeah.
How might that look? Carrying out that increased support for mental health services.
Yeah, it's $1 million question, maybe $1 billion question that we haven't quite figured out. But NCAA has new guidelines that came out, best practices around mental health. They're still fairly vague. There aren't like specific requirements that everybody has to have in place. We were all kind of hoping it would be, so we could just be like, it says here, do this, so we can do that. But it's not, which makes sense because there's different resources and structures and things like that in place. But the call for direct and easy access to a variety of mental health services is what we're looking at. So there's kind of a continuum from mental performance, kind of the skills that are help with coping and stress and performance, so to moving into a place where there's maybe more of a diagnosable depression or anxiety that occurs, to a mental health crisis where somebody's in a place of self-harm. And so the NCAA is requesting now that we have more of a continuum of services that student athletes can directly access, not, wait a month to get in somewhere in that space. What does that look like? Yeah, good question.
Well, and then in addition to that, what might you hope to achieve? Because this is a new role.
Yeah. So my oversight is over sports medicine, so injury prevention care, nutrition, which is also a growing area. It's only been about 5 or 6 years that we've had like a fueling station in athletics that has snacks, and we've got a dietitian that we contract with, and then mental health and wellness, and then strength and conditioning. So those are 4 areas that most, not all, universities have for their student athletes, but oftentimes they work fairly siloed. And so with somebody in my role, I can see what's happening in all those areas and then bring those areas together. So have more conversations around holistic health for a student athlete. If a student athlete is experiencing an academic challenge, it might be linked to the fact that they're not sleeping well, or they've got an injury, or they've got a lot of stressors, or whatever it may be. So we just treat one at a time. One, it's a lot of work for a student athlete to go get all those access resources, but 2, collectively, we're not solving the problem. We're just treating where we are at the moment, not actually trying to get together a plan for the future. So this role allows us to be a little more holistic and comprehensive in the way that we look at something and how to support student athletes.
So bigger picture than beyond just your role or even this institution, what's your take, your opinion on the NIL in college sports?
So, interesting. I think I had a teammate that recently said she was a very good soccer player at Georgia Southern. If NIL had been around, I would be a millionaire. I don't know that that's necessarily the case for her, maybe. But so it's interesting to think about what that impact is. I think the idea that if student athletes' name, image, and who they are would allow them to make money, that I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't feel like it's fair that a university would be able to keep all of the revenue, for lack of a better word, that might come from what an athlete brings to an institution. So in spirit, I think it's very appropriate. And I feel a little bummed for the student athletes that came before about not having access to those weeks. Some of those student athletes that were dabbling in that, it was not, it was against the rules and had penalties from it. So the other way, so they didn't just not get a benefit from it, they actually got penalized for going against the rules at that time. So that's kind of messy, which happens when new rules come up. But to the spirit, I'm a fan of. We don't have great parameters around it. So I think that there are a lot of businesses and donors who may not be thinking about the student athlete's best interest in it. And I think it can be complicated without some guardrails.
If you call the shots,
Hmm.
what would some of those guardrails look like?
Yeah, good question. I don't know exactly, but it's not a super quick fix, or we would have already been there. I think that there probably would be some requirements around the financial implications of what NIL deals look like for our student athletes prior to engaging in something. So whether it's tax purposes, whether it's, you know, the implications around potential feeling of pressure and those sorts of things, just so they could consider that. So some kind of conversation on the front end before getting into a contract. There's a lot of discussion of whether universities should control it or whether it should stay outside the universities. I think if the universities are controlling it, we might be getting back into the space of, well, that was a problem in the first place. But at the same time, most universities are really looking out for their student athletes. So, and know a lot of the implications of some things. So I think that there's some benefit to that. But I'm not sure it solves the problem that NIL is trying to solve in the first place. So I think the opportunity to have more upfront conversation would be really helpful in the end versus things being happening. And I think putting some guardrails around, like, name, image, and likeness can't be everybody gets the same amount, because to me, that's paying, which is what we can decide if we want to pay, but that's different than people really like you and want to follow you, so you get something, versus me, they don't know who I am, so I don't get something. And I know that creates some tension on teams for that, and can create some change there. But I think if we want to really stay with name, image, and likeness, then maybe we have to make sure that whatever deal is there is really under that realm versus, or we decide that everybody who's playing should get $100,000 to play, just call it paying, versus trying to lump them all in under one.
What other challenges do you foresee beyond NIL for the future of college sport?
Yeah, I think the growing decision-making, it's always been there, but growing decision-making around letting the money make the decision around conference alignments, around playing, those sorts of things hurt my heart. And somebody was like, well, eventually people are gonna run out of money. And I'm like, I don't believe so. Like, I believe that there will always be more money in some spaces, not for everybody, but in some spaces. We see that just in our general economy, where the rich get richer and the middle class stay here or even shrink a little bit. So I think that would still continue to happen in sport. And I think we have a lot of good guardrails at the professional level around trying to parity, and, you know, Indiana Fever don't have a very good season, and so now we get the first round draft pick, which maybe we'll get Caitlin Clark, and, you know, there's ways to try to balance things back out. And right now, we don't have those guardrails in college sports, which is why then the money is talking so much. So I think in my mind, if the professional sports wanted to put guardrails around, like, if we want to have the best product and play more fairly and have, you know, more competitive balance, we should put guardrails up. But we haven't done that in college sport, some of our sports. So it's like, why do we think that the professionals don't have it right? And we do. So.
All right, those were my questions. So I got maybe about 15 after. I don't really have a set time in mind, but what questions might you want to ask beyond what you already heard?
So I know you said that you got to coaching side. So I was just curious, from player perspective, what type of coaching style would you be? Are you more like a players coach, you know, stricter? I was just curious.
Yeah, I think I am more of a player's coach, relationship oriented. I think that try to be very transparent in what's happening, what's not happening, try to build everybody up. I feel like everybody on a team has worth. And so that there shouldn't be focus. I mean, certainly there's some players who are better than others, but really my responsibility as a coach, I feel like, and as a teacher, is that everybody present grows in their skill set. And that doesn't mean everybody's gonna be at the same level, but everybody deserves something to make them better. I also really like the blue collar hard worker who wants to grind to get better. I do feel frustrated at times with a person who's really, really good and just kind of like takes their talent for granted. So I'll have some words with them sometimes to get them back in place.
Jake?
So, obviously you're a 2014 inductee into the Georgia Southern Hall of Fame. You played 2 years in the W League with the Jacksonville Jade, but you gave a lot of that up to go back to school at WVU and get your master's and doctorates.
Yeah.
What was that like for you? What was that decision like for you to give up playing at the highest level at a professional league to go back to school?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would play soccer right now every day in training. If even at 40, almost 7, if you ask me to, I would. I did that with a little bit for tennis where I played multiple times a week and was working out because it was fun. I like to train, I like to grind, I like to get better at something. And I feel thankful that I've never felt burned out of soccer, that I started later and followed some of the best practices my parents didn't know that they were doing at the time, that I didn't play travel until I was in 8th grade. And so I still love it. My younger sister played, but she played early. She was way better than I was, but she hated it at 21. So she doesn't play at all. So it was really hard. I think the environment decided for me. At that point, I was never going to make a living off of soccer. Even playing in Europe wasn't something that, like, that's more common now, even before we've got more of our women's professional leagues back going again. But I was like, when I played in the W League, I lived in Jacksonville. They paid my rent and they paid for food and travel, but I didn't make money. So I still had to work a job. So that wasn't going to be something, and it wasn't like next year it was going to be different. That was the plan for a long time. So, so I think that I just knew that I couldn't live that way. So I just try to bring in my life as much as possible. I try to play once or twice a week. Coaching allows me to at least get back out there in the field. So I'm kicking the ball around when I can, I'll take my daughter to train whenever she can. So it is something, and I even looked at, they have adult camps. I can go away for a week and play soccer all day long for adult camp in DC. And Europe, you can still go to Europe. So I haven't done those because those take time and money away from my family, but they're on my saved bookmark list of things that I want in the future. So it is something I think about a lot. It's not something I feel like I had a chance to play a lot of soccer at a time that I could. So I don't feel like sad that I didn't have more. It was kind of time to move on, and I'm so grateful that I still get to have it in my lifeblood.
Other questions? Yeah, John.
You kind of touched on how supportive your parents were and if they didn't push you in any of your decisions. And my question is kind of, do you try to take that into your coaching career? Because I know a lot of times when you're coaching, you might have a goal for a player and they just don't want that. So do you try to humble yourself, or do you try to kind of push them a little bit, or do you just take that third perspective?
Yeah, it is super hard to try to find that balance. I have trained myself over 20 plus years to focus on their goals. I'm not sure that I did that well early, but over time I've gotten better with being whatever, maybe even my students, like if their goals aren't to be in our field of sports psychology, like even if I'm like, what do you have a lot to offer? Like I do feel like I've gotten to a point where I'm pretty comfortable with their goals as a teacher and as a coach. I am not as good at that as a parent. I've got a high schooler now who's 16, and she played soccer. She was average, like not that into it. And so I tried to be careful not to like push it. And she would say, no, I want to play. So she played. But then when she was in 8th grade, you could probably remember your middle school years, she said, Mom, I'm done with soccer. And I was like, oh, okay. Sounds good. Okay. So I was like, that's fine. We got to do something. Like, I don't care. And she's like, great, I'm going to be a cheerleader. And I was like, oh, okay. Which is not what I thought was coming. And cheerleading has a ton to offer. I've learned a lot about cheerleading, but at the time I had some thoughts about what I thought cheerleading was gonna bring for her. And so I said, that's fine, you can be a cheerleader, she's going into high school, so you can be a cheerleader for basketball and football, but I need you to be a competitive cheerleader too, so you're trained for something else, and she said, sounds good. So she took on, as an 8th grader, she was with in cheerleading, and they organize you by skill, not age, which there's some real pros to what that was like from a development standpoint. So she was with 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds, girls, some older ones, because she was new to cheerleading. And she trained 4 times a week, more than we did for soccer, got into that. And it was not my goal for her. And I really had to just be like, my goal actually is that you have purpose in your life. And if that is through cheerleading, I will learn to get on board with what that brings for you, because there's purpose to it. You're training, those sorts of things. We're going away on weekends as family, like a lot of the same things we've done soccer, just a different activity. So we grew to love and respect it for her. And then I was actually with the men's basketball team down in the Bahamas 2 and a half ago. And we were sitting on the beach, and she said, Mom, I have something to tell you. And so when your 9th grader says that to you, you're like, oh gosh. And she said, I miss soccer. And I was like, turned away, so she couldn't see my little teardrop. And she said, I said, okay, tell me more. And she was like, I realized cheerleading was good. That's not my path. I think soccer should come back into my life. And I was like, okay. So again, you live in suburban in Indianapolis. You take a year off of soccer as a 9th grader, like the road back is hard. And so I said, you know what this means? She was like, I know what this means. And working hard isn't like her go-to strength. So we're like talking more about it. And I said, I need this to be your goal, not mine. And she was like, yeah, this has nothing to do with you. And I said, okay, sounds good. That felt good. And I felt like she'd been pretty honest at that point. So I was like, okay, when we get back, this is Thanksgiving Day. When we get back, I'll find some clubs. And she's like, no, please find the clubs now. And I'm like, honey, it's Thanksgiving. We're back. And she was like, no. So we're on the computer back in the, our room, looking up clubs and when she could get tryouts and stuff. And she's picked it up, but she missed her freshman year of high school soccer. This is a longer story than you wanted, but it'd be good for things you might be writing. And she missed high school soccer freshman year. They at Hamilton Southeastern, they cut about 30 girls a year for the soccer team, which is a lot. They have 3 teams, still cut 30 girls. So I'm like, I don't know that you're gonna make this team. She's like, I don't know, I'm gonna make it either. I'm like, okay, as long as we're honest with like what's happening. She and I ran the fitness test all summer long. And finally, like halfway through the summer, she beat me. And she looked at me and I'm like, yeah, you just beat me. You should have been beating me a long time ago, but now you're beating me. And it got that confidence in, and I could see it was her goal now. Like we weren't training because I was making her train. We were training because she wanted to train. She made the team. She did play a lot on the JV team. And now we're grinding a lot. She's practicing 4 or 5 days a week. She's training with extra teams because she's still behind. But it was one of those things that I tell you that long story because I totally believe if I had forced my goal on her in 8th grade, she would be hating me now. We wouldn't have a close relationship. She might be injured because she would have been stressed out or whatever, and probably not playing anything. And so I really bit my pride for a while, tried to be where she was. I'm sure I didn't say all the right things all the right times, but we got back to a point on her own terms that allowed her to find something that she's passionate about. And so it's taught me that if I just can stay the course that way, that it's her life. And I should guide her. I've got more experience in life than she does, but ultimately she's got to make the decisions. And then she's got to own the decisions that she makes in those places. So.
So as a coach, when your team is not getting the results they want to get, how do you keep your team together so they don't fall apart because they're not getting the results they want to get?
Yeah, that's $1 million question. So I think I try to start, and that's super frustrating, especially if we feel like we have the ability to get the results. I've coached several different club teams that won state championships, and I also coached a high school team that was awful. And so I've been on both ends of that. Like non-soccer players at all. And so I think the front end of it is I've learned over time, I have to set appropriate goals for our team and then help them to buy into those goals. So if I'm setting appropriate goals on the front end, there's a little more flexibility to achieve them. So it doesn't mean that I say we're not good, so we shouldn't win, but maybe the score of the game isn't my goal. Maybe it's, we want to, like right now, my son's team is playing in a high league for indoor. And so we lose most games. But after this last game we just lost, he finally felt, he's like losing that really good game felt better than winning a game by a lot. So even though our result, the outcome wasn't what we wanted, trying to convince them that there's more to it than the actual outcome is really important. So I think that is my responsibility to talk about what are the pieces that are built into the outcome that we want and get them motivated to do that, because then usually the wins will come later. So it's reframing a little bit about what our actual goals are on the front.
So I know playing, coaching, and life, all lessons all go tied, they're tied hand in hand together.
Yeah.
What is something through your past experiences and through your entire life that you've lived, what is something that you would leave everyone with, if you could tell them right now?
Woo, that's a good one.
There's your philosophy.
Yeah,
there you
geez.
go.
You know, I think it goes back to making sure that your goal is your goal. I just sat with a student not too long ago who was upset because they realized that sports psychology was not their path, and they felt scared to tell me, scared to tell the people in their life, and I was just like, okay. So it's not your path, like, great, go find your path. So really just saying, like, do it for you. Find something, don't fumble through life, find something, do it for you. Then I would say be intentional. There's very few great things happen accidentally to you because you're, so I think I tell, again, my high schooler, like, you've got to be intentional. If you want to make this JV team again, you've got to intentionally practice, not just show up to practice, not just be there, not just show up to class, but be intentional about whatever it is. So find your path. And when your path changes, great, change your path. That's fine. But be intentional then about your new path. And just make sure that it's something that you believe in whole way through.
I mean, I'm gonna piggyback off of that because I know it's, you don't even know this story, but
Okay.
this ties into what you're saying, what you asked, and then also what you asked. And there's something here that's worthwhile for the rest of you that kind of takes it outside of this assignment. It's more bigger picture, just kind of where we are right now anyway. I mean, the very reason that we're even here right now, I mean, like you and me, that goes back to an 11th grade English teacher. I mean, I wanted to do meteorology. I have a degree in it. I did work in a newsroom. I think you knew that
Yeah,
part,
yeah.
but this is the part you don't
Yeah.
know. So I had an honors English teacher in high school that I want to say late April, maybe sometime early May. So my junior year was 1999. So this goes back about 25 years ago now, but I still remember that conversation. She had asked me to, if I had time after class, so right away I'm thinking that I forgot to turn something in, I did something wrong, because usually that's why you get asked to stay after, to talk privately with the teacher. Well, no, it actually wasn't that at all. She wanted to know, well, first of all, if I was going to college, and then if I was, what was I going to do? Was I playing tennis? Because you all know that background. But hey, I said, I don't know if I want to do that or not. I'm really into weather. I like science. I think I want to do that. And she just kind of dropped it in there that, she thought I ought to keep teaching in the back of my head because she thought I'd be good at it. That was it. That was it. But like, back to your point, like, your question, do you say something, do you not? Oh, it's hard. I'm backing you up on that point because I'm not a parent, but I am a coach and I coach high school guys. And, I don't know that you're too far removed from that age group. You kind of get tunnel vision. You're just so sure that this is what you want to do. And that's great. And if it works out, that's fine. But now she drops an example and I can give you my own example that teaching wasn't even on my radar. And I remember when she asked, when she mentioned it, like, oh, okay. I mean, why? Don't think so? Why? Wouldn't even, hadn't even considered, going in that direction. You're communicative, you think fast on your feet, you're organized, I mean, that may not look like that to some of you based off my computer when you see all the tabs in my browser window. But I mean, like, the whole point is that this is my plan B. I'm living that and have been for the last 20 some years. So, I mean, keep the door open. You just don't know. You just don't know. I mean, you may think and that's great, but leave the door open. And I mean, what I'll usually do with my guys, again, they're 16, 17. You don't know exactly what you're going to do for the next 50 some years of your life. So, I'll kind of just do what she did with me. I'll just drop that, have them stick after practice, hey, what are you thinking of doing? I noticed this, and, just kind of leave it there for them, because you never know. It might stick, it might not, it did with me, and here we are. So, yeah, it goes back to the 11th grade honors English teacher, so who knew? Last chance, questions for Dr. Blom? Some good ones. One more? Okay, one with that.
You mentioned that you still enjoy soccer, but your sister was burnt out at 21. You mentioned that making sure your goal is your goal. What do you think about the level that some parents are holding their kids to and pushing them at such a young age? What are your thoughts on that? Is it causing burnout?
When we do something hard and fast, without rest and pace, we get burnout. Pick it, anything you want. And true definition of burnout is no longer wanting to do it. There's this staleness and there's this overtraining that you can use before, which means you can feel yourself getting to that point, and if you find a break early, you can recover from it and get back in whatever you're passionate about. So we have designed youth sport. Society has designed youth sport to be hard and fast and a lot. And so by design, we are putting a lot of people into that place. My son was getting into that. We just started travel baseball, and I worked really hard. You can imagine it's probably pretty intense to coach one of my kids, because I have high expectations for what that looks like in our environment. I research youth sport. I've spent a lot of time in that space. And so we did a lot of work to try to find this coach. We finally found, we felt pretty good about it. And my son is a very deliberate learner, different than my daughter is. And he was getting too intense at 11, and we just started travel. So I had tried to do structurally what I wanted. And I said, you need to pick another sport. You got to play another sport. And he was like, what? And I'm like, you can play baseball, but I need your identity not wrapped up in just as baseball player. Because he would finish a weekend tournament on Sunday, and then be like miserable with himself until the next tournament. And I'm like, we're not doing this at 11. So put soccer in there. He picked soccer. And so then we go to practice on Tuesday, he plays soccer. He forgets all about baseball, and now he has some soccer world. And then he gets back to baseball. And not only did it physiologically allow his body to continue to grow in different ways, it allowed his mind to realize it wasn't one identity. So I think there's a time and space for lots of training, but I think we've got to broaden the fact that for anything that we're doing, that I am not just a professor or a mom or whatever. I've got multiple identities. When one goes wrong a little bit, or one gets burned out a little bit, I got some others that I'm still a part of. So I think that that's one way to kind of counter that. And I think the other thing is we just have to tell our kids to stop playing as much. Like, we just have to structure it differently. And so until we do that, but if I say no to play and you say yes to play, and then my kid's behind, like my daughter is, and then we got to scramble to get back up. So I don't have a perfect answer for it, but there are some structural things we can do that would allow it to decrease the pressure for our kids. Because it's hard for a parent to make that decision on their own. But if a league or the state association or the high school association says, no baseball can happen this time of year, or only two games a weekend or something, structurally, and everybody's playing by the same rules, then it'll be a little bit easier for parents to buy it. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so we don't need to
Yep.
record the debrief, so I'm gonna kill that. And